Well, Australians prefer to maintain a professional relationship with their superiors. That's according to the latest survey. Let's get some detail now. Joydeep Hor joining us from People and Culture Strategies. Joydeep, welcome back. Good to see you. We just don't want to cozy up to the boss. What are the benefits or perhaps downside of doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. A recent survey saying that 70% of Australian workers avoid forming friendships with their superiors, with their managers in a workplace context, which is an interesting data point, and I must say not one that I was massively surprised by. And there's some additional data that suggests that there are some pronounced generational differences. So if you look at baby boomers, they might be more inclined to have friendships or seek out friendships with managers and supervisors, as opposed to your millennials or Gen Xers and whatever else. So I guess as I reflected on what all of this means and whether I was surprised by it or whether it accords with what I'm seeing, I must say I wasn't really too surprised, but it's interesting to reflect on why this might be happening. And I think if we reflect on the way in which those who are coming into the workforce now, or those who may have entered the workforce in the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, one of the radical shifts for those individuals is the manner in which they have been educated about workplace practices. And it's very common these days that at secondary school, high school level, and certainly at university level, the amount of transparent education around what is meant to happen in a workplace context, what leadership is like and should be like, is done a lot more than would have been the case 30 years ago. And a lot of that theory would say that, look, good managers are professional, have professional boundaries and don't cross boundaries, and that means that they don't engage in bullying and harassment, and they don't have social relationships or friendships with people who work for them. And that's what the theory would say. So that's why I'm not massively surprised that a lot of people who are entering the workforce now say, I want to avoid that because that's not the hallmark of a good leader or a good employer.
So what this is coming from the employees, therefore, is perhaps futile that employers would strike up a friendship with their workers.
Well, I think this is the interesting thing, because notwithstanding that might be the perspective of employees, that may not be the preferred style of leaders. Now, if you just look at it from a generational perspective, if, for example, you have those who are from the baby boomer generation who are in leadership roles, or maybe Gen Xers who are in leadership roles, their views about the appropriateness or otherwise of friendships between leaders and subordinates is going to be quite different. They're not, in all likelihood, going to see that as something to be frowned upon in all instances. That's not to say that they won't respect appropriate boundaries, but there'd be a lot across those generations, for example, and of course we're stereotyping, who would say, well, look, if I need to build a good personal relationship with someone in order to get the best out of that particular person, well, why wouldn't I do that? Ultimately, my job as a leader is to get the best out of my people. And in fact, a lot of those individuals, notwithstanding the statistics, may still have some level of expectation of care and concern from their managers and supervisors. So does that cross over into friendship? It's all very grey, but I think this idea that employers should, as a result of this, advise their leadership to steer clear of friendships altogether would probably be a retrograde step.
So, Joydeep, then do businesses need to set up clear boundaries with management and the employees?
I think what it'll come down to is for some employers, they will look at this entirely or primarily from the perspective of how do I manage my legal risk? And I know that I'm managing my legal risk better if I have all of my people steer clear of anything to do with non-work related conversation or too much social engagements and social interactions, and drinking after work and whatever else is something to be frowned upon. Well, if that's your perspective, then you will be putting in harder boundaries and harder expectations in terms of how people behave. But I think the more sophisticated organisations are going to say, look, you can't have a one-size-fits-all in terms of how a manager or a leader in an organisation relates to their people. because fundamentally all people are different, and what a person's expectations are from their leader is going to be shaped by a whole heap of different things, including their background, their pedigree, potentially even their family circumstances, relationship circumstances. A lot of people look for society in their workplace, and it's not just about that transactional, I'm here to work, I get paid for working, etc. So organisations need to think very carefully about this. Absolutely, there are some watch outs, but I think being too cavalier or extreme will work against the organisations.
And do you think this is changing, particularly in this current environment where there's a lot of debate going on about the return to the office?
Definitely. I think if you play this out, one argument would be that those leaders in organisations who have more trusted relationships with people who work for them are going to be able to feel trusted when those leaders call on the individuals to, for example, change their working arrangements. If you might have been working from home for 3 days a week and your organisation says through your manager that you now need to come back more regularly, well, if that is the case, then your manager is probably going to have more traction with the relevant employees because they are more trusted. And as we look to these kinds of changed working arrangements and whatever else might happen, of course, been changing for a while, I think those leaders that have invested in trusted relationships, perhaps with a greater element of care and concern and authenticity, are going to be more likely to have a more seamless transition in terms of the response that they get from their people.